That's James's dinner. And that's mine with the smoothie. And I'm going to be going over this book. So that's Killer Germs by Pete Moore. And the potatoes look kind of gross because I put the allspice on afterwards, but they're going to taste good. James likes it. Well, it's that lentil mushroom
this
stuff
here?
that I put
Oh,
on.
it looks, it doesn't
well,
look
no.
It looks kind of different.
Yeah. But it's actually pretty good.
So what did you do? You kind of chopped it up or something?
No, I put allspice on afterwards. So
oh, okay.
That's what that lump in the middle is.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Helps, I guess, sometimes to need glasses.
James mixes it up. Doesn't
I mix things up, you know. Sometimes I mix myself up.
I was making, well, when I make the nice little kale nuggets and stuff and the carrot, it's really lost on him because he just chops it all up and all of his food is mixed together. So
it tends to be that way. Yeah. I appreciate what you do with the kale nuggets. If I could make burgers out of them, like with mustard or something like that, I still would probably crush them up a little bit, but yeah. So you've got what? You're going to be starting off this Killer Germs? Is this the first?
This is the first installment of it. I'm going to put the time in, reading you all my notes from this and there. So I'm going to do it in a few.
It's very important because it's not just about COVID-19.
No.
This is about superbugs. There's lots of stuff coming down the pike. Mm-hmm. And it's not just COVID-19 because the Chinese have discovered that they've got some swine flu loose. They had some loose last year. Pauline discovered that. And
I didn't discover it. I just read about it.
Well, she read about it, you know what I'm saying?
Anyway.
And tied it up. I've got somewhere along the line today, and maybe tomorrow if it doesn't work out, 4 different books that I've stashed away.
Okay, first I'm going to talk about this. So you can eat in the meantime while I talk.
Okay.
Killer Germs. So this one was put out in 2001. And I didn't think much of it because it was put out by Carlton, and I'm thinking,
oh,
really?
Is that the card company?
That's what I'm thinking, right? And so I'm like, But actually, I really like the way he writes. Well, you'll see if you enjoy this sort of thing. It's packed full of information, which is useful to everyone. Everyone should know this stuff. So, page 9. Half of the people in low-income countries dies at an early age from an infectious disease. Infectious diseases kill 17 million people a year. A third of these deaths occur in developed countries. Infectious diseases accounted for 20% of deaths in 1992, a 50% increase since 1980. In 1992, the U.S. used $120 billion to fund the fight against infectious diseases. So keep in mind, this information it may seem out of date to you, like I'm reading you a book from 2001. I can guarantee if you borrow this, well, not guarantee, but pretty much, if you borrow this one from the public library, nobody will have picked it off the shelf since probably 2002. So you're not as likely to get COVID from it. So anyway.
Yeah, isn't that appalling? I mean, it's the stuff people should be reading.
Yeah.
Are you listening, Teresa?
But when I'm reading the notes and I say, and it says in there, currently, well, that was 2001. So anyway, page 12. Hep C was first identified in 1989. Flu-like symptoms.
Late.
Then jaundice, lack of tears, so eyes were dry and patients tired. Estimated that 170 million infected over the last couple decades. More than 30 diseases have been identified for the first time, just not that long ago.
How many?
More than 30. Many have unknown origins. Ebola, virtually. I don't like virtually, so I make note of it. No
this
history.
Is a different writer.
Yeah. 1980, emerged, hiding. Re-emerged 1995. A third of victims were healthcare workers in contact with blood or body fluids. Incidence of TB increased among people whose own ability to fight infection has been weakened by other diseases like HIV/AIDS. 1 in 10 people who go to a hospital for treatment are infected while there. So This next one's page 14, and I think it's from Britain, 1999, MRSA, near epidemic levels, responsible for 37% of fatal cases of blood poisoning compared to 3% 8 years earlier. Joseph McCormick, microbiologist at the Institut Pasteur in Paris, said, I cannot help but observe that we are swimming against a biological tide of overwhelming proportions, which is compounded by the lack of information from precisely those parts of the world where infectious diseases are highly endemic and populations rapidly expanding.
Oh, there's a big problem.
Within decades, malaria was resistant to quinine. Page 16, 1683. Leeuwenhoek, I don't know how to pronounce that name, described
I don't know either. That's a good Dutch name.
Some little animal.
Yeah, you're right.
He found on the plaque between his teeth, and other people's teeth too. The biggest had a very strong and swift motion that shot through the water like a pike through water, he said, and others spun around like a tap. So, really interesting. Yeah. Bacteria can be treated with antibiotics, unlike viruses. Viruses can't really be described as being alive because they have no power to operate on their own. And James and I put in brackets my own, what I think, as currently defined.
Yeah, like we have no power to operate on our own outside of oxygen. You know, they've got to be in a cell or something like that. Come on.
So anyway, they are very small parcels of code. The largest are 450 nanometers. The smallest are 20 nanometers. Only the largest can be seen with complex light microscopes. Page 20. Most of the 100,000 species of fungi are harmless or beneficial, but 400 of them infect people. Page 29. Plague. Each time it bites a new host, the flea's stomach contents, including the bacteria, vomited into the host's blood. At temperatures higher than 27 degrees Celsius, the bacteria grow, but guts are clear, and numbers of bacteria released decrease. Less likely to get plague in summer. Bubonic, swollen lymph nodes, black skin patches, high fever, headaches, shaking, chills, delirium. It can cause pneumonia, pneumonic plague, infection of lungs which is highly contagious. It leads to coma and death in almost all cases if treatment isn't started within hours of infection. The septicemic form is almost always fatal. That's what it is. Bloodstream infection. The historic origins seem to have been China for the plague. And James has talked about before the Black Plague, like we've been hearing on the CBC from experts saying, oh, well, COVID can't be a biological weapon, because this can't be biological terrorism sort of thing, because it's not biologically engineered. They found that and that's what they're telling us anyway. That's what they're reporting to us, that it's not. But the thing is like James has pointed out,
many times,
there were biological weapons used before there was biological engineering. So James had pointed out that how who was it that put plague people on the catapults and shot them into...
You put corpses that were...
Yeah, not live people. That's a little harsh.
Believe me, they were so harsh. They were capable. It was the Mongols, you know.
Yeah.
I said where, incidentally, so don't get all on your high horse. Mm-hmm. The Mongols got a relatively good religion, Buddhism, and settled their hash down.
Okay,
but, in their time, they were pretty bad. Anyway, they would be besieging a place, and they would have taken over the countryside, and they were saying, well, we're going to speed things up here because we're going to make sure you're not getting enough nutrition, proper nutrition, right? Mm-hmm. But then we'll give you a bug, too. Mm-hmm. One of the worst bugs come down the pike, the bubonic plague. So they just get a big catapult and they were capable of catapulting a lot bigger things than a corpse. You know, catapult
Yeah.
big rocks and stuff like that. So
So, page 32. The western third of the U.S. has had incidences of plague. 1934 Oregon, 1936 Utah, 1937 Nevada, 1940 Idaho, 1949 New Mexico, 1950 Arizona, 1957 Colorado, 1978 Wyoming. 247 cases of human plague reported and 37 died in the U.S. between 1980 and 1997. Recently plague in Bolivia, Brazil, Ecuador, Peru, a bunch of places in Africa, and loads of places in Asia. 1997, 4,370 cases and 154 deaths. Faces of mummies from 18th and 20th Egyptian dynasties, 1570 to 1085 BC.
let me just revise that. Okay, it's about 10. It's about 1050 to 650 BC. Thank you.
If you've been watching James, he's revised Egyptian chronology, so he's giving you his revision. As does the mummy of Ramses V, who died young in 1157 BC. The Hittites first recorded smallpox in 1350 BC during the Egyptian-Hittite War. That's page 38.
Who
and
died?
Another source of virtually.
Who died there?
What?
King Tut?
Ramses V.
No, after that.
What?
During the Hittite War.
Oh, they just said the Hittites first recorded it. Smallpox. During the war with the Egyptians.
Maybe that's what was going around. There was some sort of disease the Hittites caught. Sapalulumas, however you pronounce his name. The first. He died. He was down towards Damascus, actually. He came from present-day Turkey. Come quite a far away. But he and his soldiers brought it back. He died. I think his son died too. Arnawandus.
So anyway, I'm thinking that reading this, I think our health officials that were trying to keep us from panicking were thinking that this was plague. Because they were saying it was going to calm down in the summer. Apparently plague does. So I think that's what they were thinking, reading this, but or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, 39. The smallpox virus's code sequence is huge. 186,000 base pairs of DNA, info for 187 genes. Many of the viral genes were similar to bits of human code. They know us on the inside. Page 40. Syphilis. Skin-to-skin contact, transfer, kissing, sharing a beverage container, headaches, aching bones, loss of appetite, fever, fatigue, hair comes out in clumps. Polio outbreak in 1916. Northeast U.S. killed 6,000 people, mostly kids. Page 43. When the polio vaccine is taken, it can mutate within the gut within 2 to 5 weeks. The person vaccinated is then immune to this newly emerged wild-type virus. However, when these viruses leave the immunized person's gut, they are capable of causing disease if picked up by a non-immunized person.
Get your immunization, please.
If, otherwise, anyway. Switching to a SALK, S-A-L-K, injected vaccine would prevent this, but it's less effective.
Yeah, that's Jonas Salk. And, he was a good guy. He came up with that thing, and he just gave it to the world.
46. Bacteria are the dominant forms of life on Earth, but most of them leave us alone. Some can double every 20 minutes. One bacterium at 6 a.m. could become 250,000 by noon. By midnight, 68 billion. Page 47. The Cocci group. Pneumonia, tonsillitis, bacterial heart disease, bacilli, tuberculosis, whooping cough, tetanus, typhoid fever, diphtheria, salmonella, shigellosis, Legionnaire's disease, and botulism. Spirochetes, syphilis, yaws, leptospirosis, and Lyme.
Yep.
Page 48, gram-positive bacteria except die. And he goes through the whole, explains it really well in there. So if you're interested, go to page 48. Mycoplasmas, number 1, surrounded by a single membrane and no cell wall. Number 2, gram-positive bacteria with a single layer cell wall. And number 3, gram-negative bacteria with at least 2 layers, making their cell wall. Page 49. Bacteria specialize and thrive in exacting conditions. Some need a little iron, others particular vitamins or minerals. Some must have oxygen, while others can't live in oxygen environments. Bacteria can either break into a person's cells or they send toxic materials that cause trouble. Page 50. Lots of different bugs cause dysentery, diarrhea, Shigella, usually from drinking water contaminated with human feces. A fly on your food can deliver enough bacteria to cause this. So that's something to think of while you're eating, hey? They stick to the gut wall of your colon. Genes in the bacteria become activated and initiate the production of a protein that causes cells in the gut lining to engulf the bacteria. M cells they do this. So M cells are like security guards for our body. They apprehend invaders. Shigella resist arrest and infect normal gut lining cells. These gut cells die, so absorption of fluid decreases. So drink plenty of clean water. Listeria. Mild flu-like symptoms. 10% probably have an ongoing infection without being aware. It's lethal in some immunosuppressed, though. Diphtheria. Key cause of infant death in 1930s. Grayish film in throat, made of 2 proteins and a sulfur bond. When inside our more acidic environment, the 2 proteins split apart. A single molecule of its toxin can kill a single cell. If it's a heart cell, you're in trouble. Polish-German bacteriologist Emil von Behring, 1901, discovered how to make an antitoxin. Vaccinated children can be infected by the bug without ill effects while being walking reservoirs of the disease, moving it to places where people aren't immunized. The phage can move the toxin genes between strains of bacteria. You can kill the bacteria in food by cooking it, but you don't get rid of the toxins. 7 types, A to G. A is most toxic. These toxins get into the bloodstream. When in the nervous system, they block the action of acetylcholine. The neurotransmitter is a chemical messenger released by a nerve when it wants to pass a signal on to another nerve, or to tell muscles that it's time to contract. Paralysis results and damage is often irreversible. The first signs appear 4 to 36 hours after eating food. Blurred vision, no swallowing, can't speak clearly. Can be accompanied by nausea, vomiting, headache. Page 56. Botulism toxin is one of the most toxic compounds ever. 10 milligrams, equivalent to a few grains of sugar, can kill 25 people. It hates oxygen. Don't heat food and store it out at room temperature. The heating drives the oxygen out of food, and the cool inner parts allow the C. botulinum to grow. Page 58. Antibiotic discovery. Alexander Fleming, London, Ernst Chain, Howard Florey, and others. Austrian-born Howard Florey. Rhodes Scholarship, Oxford. Fleming and Chain shared a Nobel Prize in 1945. Florey was knighted in 1944. Heatley received an Order of the British Empire. So this was a pretty major event. Mary Hunt from America found a rock melon whose mold, P. chrysogenum, was 3,000 times more productive than Fleming's original. So that was major. American factories made billions of units. So thank you, Mary Hunt. Mm-hmm. It's too bad it all went so badly. American factories made billions of units of penicillin per month, and money generated has underpinned the U.S. pharma industry pretty well ever since. By 1979, 15,000 tons of fermented bulk product were produced. Market value at least $240 million. Once purified, 5 times that dollar value. Curing the soldiers of gonorrhea in 1 to 2 injections gave a great military advantage. Streptomycin treats tuberculosis by blocking the protein production of the bacteria. It locks on to 70's ribosomes. These are unique to bacteria and are essential in translating genetic code into chains of amino acids. Macrolides bind to 50's ribosomes so the protein chain can't grow. And I'm going to go on. Now, the book is written, I like the way it gives a lot of detailed information, scientific information, that I think everyone should know. I don't like things that read as though they're just popularizations, and there are some books I've read, it seems almost like they're trying to write fiction or something. But anyway,
They probably are.
who knows? But this is definitely worth reading. If you feel a need to borrow something from your local public library right now. Anyway, James is going to talk about some books, I guess, and I'm going to eat my salad and drink my...
Hey! What do we deal with?
I'll tell you the time. You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, there we go.
Pick
Yeah,
up a-
minutes per book. So here's one that Pauline and I read together a while back. Collected Poems, 1909 to 1935. I thought it was 36, but 35. I think this was published in 36. There we go. So it finishes off with Burnt Norton, which was first of 4 relatively long and relatively pretentious poems. Way too much philosophy in there. Way too much abstraction. And so that's in the 4 quartets, right? So that's the first of the 4 quartets. Okay. So this is a slim volume. It should have been slimmer, actually. A lot of the stuff that dude wrote after 1925, really, was more or less garbage. I think the thing he put out in 25 was was actually just outtakes from, as it were, from Wasteland, which was put out in 1922. So yeah, The Hollow Man, 1925. So a lot of stuff that he did after the Wasteland was just like, even if it wasn't outtakes from Wasteland, it's just a grump against society, like he's grumping about Unreal City, like London just being a crowd flowed out over London Bridge. So many, I had not thought death had undone so many. Take a pill, T.S., you stupid moron. Anyway, he was a pretty good writer and that sort of stuff. It's just he got into that thing. He got religion, and anything that wasn't that religion or whatever, it was kind of purgatory on earth, if not hell on earth. And, it gave bad taste. So he's hanging around with Ezra Pound, who had a little radio show during World War II. And he came from Idaho, and he should have stuck to Idaho and maybe, growing potatoes. But poor old dude was on the Italian radio, and he was calling down the Allies, calling down democracy, and calling down Jews, which was scraping the bottom of the barrel. So that's the kind of, you read in here, and there's little things, like that just, he's talking about Jews, with German, Jewish kind of names. And none of it's, Rachel Ney Rabinovich is not German, but Russian or Slavic. Tears at the grapes with murderous paws. So, come on. Yeah, he just had a trouble with Jews, like a lot of intellectuals did. I wouldn't necessarily call him, he was right-wing eventually, but I think up till that point in time, he was fashionably anti-Semitic, and maybe
a lot of academia, the humanities, still have that problem.
They've gone back to their vomit.
Yeah,
exactly right. So left-wingers like Proudhon and others, way back when, were anti-Semitic, and it was fashionable up until maybe World War I or stuff like that to be amongst left-wingers to be anti-Semitic, because Jews were associated with the bankers, and of course bankers were bad people. And the big trouble is these fashionable left-wingers were worse than the bankers. So, and they are nowadays too. I gotta say, the ones who are anti-Semites are worse than the bankers, and stuff like that. They're the ones who are marching around with a red and black flag. And even ones that don't go quite that far, they're worse than bankers. Now, we'll deal with Paul Anka, speaking of someone who's worse than bankers. Paul Anka pride of Ottawa, Ontario, capital of Canada. So at one point in time, in the late 50s, he had the biggest selling single of all time, Diana. Oh, please stay with me, Diana. And when I was a kid, I used to think that he was a Italian. Italian. You know, that kind of Mediterranean kind of look to him. And then I was going, his name's got a K in it. You know, Italian doesn't have a K in it like that. So I was going, maybe he's Jewish or something like that. But it turns out, now here he was a heartthrob. You know, here you can see, you know, like he was a short little guy. But teenage girls loved him, you know, and he was a teenager himself. I think he was about 16 when he broke. Now you can see he's a fine-looking guy, you know, in terms of conventional Western standards.
Yeah.
But his nationality is, and he's been very successful. Wrote hits for My Way for Frank Sinatra. And he had hits of his own all the way into the 70s. Having My Baby, One Man Woman, One Woman Man. He wrote for Tom Jones, one of his biggest hits, She's a Lady. Bow, wow, wow. She's a Lady.
He did that?
Yeah, it's some of the
That was
worst
so
songs
bad.
ever written. You know, and they called it Puppy Love. This is back when he was a teenager and stuff like that, so it was some sort of excuse, but there wasn't in 1967.
Well, people loved it.
People loved this stuff.
It was very popular.
It was very popular. It didn't, you know, like what he said about the She's a Lady. He can't stand it himself. He'd never. I don't know if he ever sings it. He said he wrote it for Tom Jones, and I'm going, yeah. And he said he had to change the lyrics when he did My Way himself because he wrote it for Frank Sinatra, you know. And I'm going, yeah. I think this guy maybe was a Canadian kind of guy, but you know. I want to point out that this guy's Lebanese, okay? Lebanese, but he's not Muslim, okay?
Lebanese Canadian?
Lebanese, well, Christian. That's what his ancestry was. He was born, I'm pretty sure, in Canada.
Born in Canada?
Yeah.
So his ancestry is Lebanese?
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of people are saying, hey, he's a piece of person of color, you know? Here's how he describes himself. White bourgeois, okay? White bourgeois, and he is right. Anyone who looks Mediterranean, and that includes people from Saudi Arabia, they are white. You can go around making excuses for them. We're the ones who don't fit in, but they are white.
Okay, I want to post this one, so.
Okay. Paul Anka describes himself as white, middle class. Okay? And he succeeded. And he succeeded. And he succeeded. Now, I don't particularly care for him. What you get in here is eventually made it in Las Vegas. And there's a lot of excuse making for mob guys and mob type activity. They're not so bad. It was understood no one got killed in Las Vegas. Of course, what happened is people might get kidnapped and thrown in a car and end up